Listen, Mayor, I want to agree with you that Osborne has muddied the waters by calling his minimum wage the living wage, and I think you should go and have a strong word with him about that. There is a strong argument for the London waiting, don't you think, on this? Because the London waiting is on things like a higher pay-to-stay threshold for better-off social housing tenants and higher student loans and so on. Is that something you are going to make a case about? You say it's a sensible idea, but could you go a bit further and say, well, yes, you will support the idea?
I will certainly, as I've said just now, I will certainly look at what we can do there. My anxiety is that any particular, the waters, to use your metaphor, will become even further muddied if we enter into a great conflict or great argument about that question, when what I want everybody to focus on is the moral need to pay the £9.15. And if we lose sight of that, we will really have lost a very considerable prize.
There is the fact as well that there are some people who are going to experience, in London, who are going to experience a gap. You are going to set the London living wage in November. In April, the government cuts are going to come in. There will be people in London living from April to November, when you set the living wage again, who will be experiencing real deprivation. What you could do is, when you set the London living wage this November, you could take into account those cuts next year. Is that something you're prepared to do?
I mean, just to go over my last point again, I'm more than willing to look at a London waiting for the national living wage and to try to see. But on the second point, it's very important that the GLA economics unit that does the living wage should not be seen to be the tool of the mayoralty in any way, and they should be able to set that wage independently. So I'd be reluctant to go down that line.
But you could point out to them that there is going to be this gap for people.
I'm sure that they're more than capable of seeing that themselves.
Okay, right. I'll send them the little transcript from this meeting. Can I also talk about, you say there's a moral need to pay the London living wage for employers, but I've urged you before to make it compulsory so that it's not just a moral need, but there's also a financial need, because people who aren't paying the London living wage actually put a burden onto the taxpayer. And surely it's a good Tory policy to make businesses pay a fair wage so that they aren't taking loads of money from the taxpayer in terms of...
Well, absolutely.
And so, what about...
Well, that is the purpose of what the Chancellor has brought in the form of the national living wage. And he's quite right, because what you've got is a situation, as you rightly say, in which big corporations are mainlining tax credits in order to subsidise low pay, and sometimes to the tune of hundreds of millions of pounds. I think I saw that Next is getting like £250 million subsidised into its workforce's pay packets in order to effectively out of its bottom line. That cannot be right. That cannot be the right way forward.
So why not make...
And Next is by no means alone. There are Tesco's, all sorts of companies are now in this position, and really it's because of the huge growth in tax credits. The way forward is to, as you rightly say, to lift people out of low pay. Now, the coercive element that the living wage adopt, the coercive approach, has its risks and has its downsides, because there will be businesses that can't cope, and there will be businesses for whom it is simply too high, and they will. I'm afraid there will be some companies whose business model doesn't allow them to, the risk is that they will lay off staff, and you saw that in the Chancellor's statement. He made a calculation about the numbers that might be laid off.
I heard you say this on the radio, but actually we could exclude small businesses from this if they have fewer than 10 employees, for example.
That's the sort of thing that is worth discussing. But then you don't have a blanket living wage.
As a good Tory, surely you don't support unviable businesses being propped up by the taxpayer. I simply don't understand why you don't think that compulsory living wage is actually a good Tory move to make businesses trimmer and more efficient.
Well, I agree with, I certainly agree that the living wage is, and this is why I think it's been so successful in London, our campaign has been so successful in London the last few years. Businesses broadly do accept that if they pay the living wage and they treat their employees with dignity and with respect, then they are paid back with loyalty and higher productivity, and they end up with lower HR bills, lower staff turnover, and better results.
I completely agree with you, but there are more people now in London not earning the living wage than there were when you came into power.
That is because there are now more people in employment in London than ever before.
Whatever reason,
and
you're
there are more
not
people in
keeping
London
up.
than ever before. As it happens, there are far more people being paid the living wage than there were when I came in.
You're trying to encourage businesses, but you're not making it compulsory, which means more and more people are living on poverty wages. If you made it compulsory, there would be more people lifted out of poverty.
As you know fine well, Jenny, we don't have the statutory powers to make it compulsory. What the government has done is introduce a national living wage, which is compulsory, which will involve some rigidities, but which I warmly welcome. It's a huge step in the right direction. But we mustn't lose sight of the simultaneous campaign for the London living wage, which, as everybody appreciates, is £9.15 rather than £7.20, which is the national
I think
living wage.
Osborne's being very tricky, and he's competing with you on this.
Well, I don't mind. People can steal my clothes wherever they will, whatever, as much as they like, as far as I'm concerned. Unprincipled scoundrel.
That's okay.
I'm being